All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Matthew Shiner podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at an article on NCR. New anti-Catholic sex education guidelines in Hamburg are fruit of German synodal way, say experts. Catholic parents wishing to protect their children from such education face, quote, complete entrapment, end quote, says pro-family advocates, as homeschooling is banned in Germany and they are obliged to pay the church tax. Alright, so let's start reading this article, and we'll look at the website on the Archdiocese of Hamburg, which has been translated by Google Translate, so it's not 100% perfect, of course, but we're just going to look at it. Alright, so Hamburg, Germany, advocates of Catholic marriage and the family are hoping that Pope Leo intervenes to help parents protect their children in the face of new sex education guidelines being imposed in a major German diocese that promote the LGBT agenda, including transvestism and non-binary identities. They say the guidelines are further proof of the abandonment of Catholic moral teaching in society, a fruit of the 2019 to 2023 German synodal way, and part of, quote, complete entrapment, end quote, of Catholic parents who wish to shield their children from such, quote, indoctrination, end quote. The Archdiocese of Hamburg published in June 5th a, quote, new framework for sex education in Catholic schools, end quote, which it trumpeted as, quote, sending a clear signal for a contemporary, value-based, and scientifically grounded sexual pedagogy, end quote. Pardon me. Its implementation, said the Archdiocese's Vicar General, Palatine Father Sasha Philip Geisler, is, quote, an important step towards development attitudes, achieving justice in our schools, and strengthening teachers and all educational staff, end quote. He claimed it does not introduce a new theology, but rather, quote, acceptance of diversity regarding sexual orientations and gender identity, end quote. He also said they are advocating, quote, a life-affirming and, in this sense, positive view of sexuality, end quote. The Archdiocese issued a statement June 5th that the, quote, recognition of different identities and sexual orientations is actively promoted, end quote, and that discrimination and taboos, end quote, are to be considered, quote, consciously dismantled, end quote. Christopher Hape, head of the Archdiocesan Department for Schools and Universities, said the Archdiocese wants Catholic schools to, quote, be safe places where sexuality is not taboo, but is considered in all its complexity and dignity, end quote. Quote, perspectives and value systems have changed in recent decades, end quote, he contended, and, quote, accordingly, we too must be able to provide contemporary answers to the questions of children and young people, end quote. So let's look at the Archdiocesan website, which has been translated here. Quote, the article here is titled New Framework for Sexual Education in Catholic Schools. With a new framework for sexual education in Catholic schools, the Archdiocese of Hamburg is sending clear signal for contemporary, value-based, and scientifically sound sexual orientation. I want to highlight that. Contemporary, value-oriented, and scientific sound education. I want to point out that all three of these things do not go together, because it is not contemporary. Well, it is contemporary. It is a new teaching. However, it is, quote, value-oriented, but it is not Catholic value-oriented if it is promoting this LGBT and non-binary ideologies, as it says, and, quote, scientifically sound sexual education, end quote, which is completely not true, because transvestism is not scientifically sound. So anyways, and it's not scientifically sound, and it's certainly not Catholic value-oriented. It's value-oriented towards modern, towards modern secular ideology, as the German synodal way has been known to do. Summing up the program, the Archdiocese listed its different elements, which, quote, included, quote, holistic sex education, end quote, conveyed in a, quote, gender-sensitive way, end quote, promotion, quote, promotion of relationship competence, end quote, handling of, quote, one's own and others' feelings, end quote, and empowering young people to, quote, develop their identity, end quote. Of course, we should develop our identity, developing our identity in Christ, and developing our identity and vocations as such. I'm reading the article now, but my screen locked up. I apologize, my screen locked up, so I've been having trouble with that. Anyways, so the way this is being done is it's obviously being done in an anti-Catholic way. And it claims that it's and this is the Archdiocese's way of saying it, and you'll notice that there's a lot of quotes in this. Sending a clear signal for contemporary value-based and scientifically grounded sexual pedagogy, as I mentioned, it's not value-based or scientifically grounded anything. But I want to quote here Father Geisler, which I had to look up the Google Translate. I had to look it up because I don't know how to pronounce German very well. But anyways, an important step towards development attitudes, achieving justice in our schools, and strengthening teachers and all educational staff, and advocating a life-affirming and, in this sense, positive view of sexuality. I apologize for those of you online. A life-affirming and, in this sense, positive view of sexuality. Rather, it's looking at a very much more secular view of sexuality, and a wrong view of sexuality at that. And so the point of this being, I'm not going to read all of this front part of the article. What it is looking at is it's not looking at a view of sexuality that's Catholic. And in America, many public schools are looking at sex education. You can probably find sex education in your schools. And in some places, this is a very similar way to the German way here, the Hamburg way here. Which, by the way, Germany is one of the most sexually liberated countries, and in fact, it has a city that is considered the most sexually liberated city on the world. So again, it's not looking at promoting a Catholic view of sexuality, it's promoting a LGBT, and of course, wrong and anti-Catholic view of sexuality. Promoting LGBT ideology of bisexuality and same-sex marriage and transvestism. So, strong criticisms leading pro-family and pro-marriage Catholics have decried the guidelines, which they say are part of a so-called, quote, comprehensive sexuality education, end quote, based on the work of U. Swilert, emeritus professor of, quote, sexual sciences, end quote, at the Christian Albrechts University of Kiel. The founder of Germany's sex education program, Seilert, was a student of the late Professor Helmut Kentler, who, according to Demo für Alle, a pro-family advocacy group, was a notorious proponent of pedophilia, a, quote, central figure in a pedophilic abuse network, end quote, and the originator of emancipatory sex education, end quote, that has taken roots across Germany. Again, Germany is a very sexually liberated country, quote, 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 which, of course, I feel that it's a very, very strong way of saying that LGBT ideology is a slippery slope down to pedophilia becoming a socially acceptable thing. And we see here that this pro-family advocacy group talks about that this German sex science professor was a proponent of pedophilia. Kentler built up Sex Education Universe with the Institute of Sex Education, which he founded in 1988, says Hedwig von Beverforde, founder of Demo für Alle. Seilert then became, quote, the link between Kentler's sex education visions and political sponsors and enablers, end quote, before going on to, quote, transform Kentler's agenda, end quote, supplementing Kentler's approach with modern neo-emancipatory intentions of breaking up the heteronormative attitudes and images of children, so on, so forth. So, we'll continue reading here. Von Beverforde told the Register June 25th that the Hamburg framework, quote, incorporates the highly questionable and unscientific ideas of Kentler. As I said, these are not really scientific ideas, especially regarding transgenderism. You can read about the destruction. It's truly anti-science because what it does is it destroys bodies, it maims people, and it turns them into... They can never truly be the opposite gender. It turns what is a functioning body that generally it's a functioning body of a person who is a one gender, feels that they are to be the other gender, and then maims their body, destroys their body through hormones, through sciences, and then through destructive surgeries. And they can never truly be the opposite gender, and then they become something that can never be either gender because they've destroyed their body, maimed their body, and can never be the person that they wanted to be or the person that they were before. And you can look up people who have detransitioned and see the horrible destructions that have been done to their body, and even those who have transitioned and aren't detransitioning but feel that they have destroyed their body. To continue, she said his ideology has found its way into university and school curricula and even into the World Health Organization's sex education standards for Europe. Of course, this is all true. The World Health Organization, supposedly a health organization meant to, benefit us, is talking about this ideology and makes it sort of health. Uh, Obviously, we as Catholics don't believe in any of this, and that's why there's such a thing. And regardless, transgenderism and especially LGBT ideology of sex identity, of same-sex ideology and such, it's wrong, and it's against nature, and it's against what we teach. Pope Francis intervened several times to halt the process. So it's not Pope Francis, who's supposedly this very good LGBT figure, whom many will spearhead as being some kind of Catholic, um, in person who's supporting LGBT ideology. He really wasn't. Supposedly he used a slur against gay men in a meeting with seminarians. He said that transgender ideology is one of the most dangerous things, and these gay blessings. He was not in favor of same-sex marriage or allowing it in the church. Checkmated at every turn. Why should loving parents, the primary educators who have given their life to their children, be forced to pay for their corruption? Catholic parents are checkmated at every turn. It's utterly an evil trap. St. John Paul, Pope John Paul II, never tired of teaching that the future of the church passes by way of the family. Both have been hijacked in Germany. So I'm gonna leave it there. There's a whole lot more about checkmating, how parents are left with essentially they're left to this to be taught to their children. So what do I think? What about this is there to say about these guidelines, this teaching, this pamphlet in Germany? Of course it's wrong. And of course something should be done about this. And by the way, it says in this article it won't be implemented until the 2026-27 school year, so there's still time for it to be put down. But in general, this is, of course, anti-Catholic teaching being brought by Catholic bishops in Germany, a teaching that allows LGBT ideology to be brought into the school in a positive light. So what has to be done? Well, it has to be stopped, and we have to take this as a warning of what can happen within our own diocese. Of course, this is a big German thing, the German synodal way, allowing liberal ideologies, especially in regards to LGBT ideology, to be brought into Germany and other places. And you can see what is being done in Germany. And of course, I believe Pope Francis has warned the Germans and what can be done here. So the German Diocese in Hamburg has published this anti-Catholic sex education teaching, and I will put it here. You can't see it now because my screen locked up again. The framework defines key principles that should guide sexual education in Catholic schools: equality and diversity, holistic sexual education, promoting relationship ideas, scientific foundations, and Christian view of humanity, which of course it teaches neither of those, prevention and protection, and critical judgment. And of course the main thing that I want to talk about is the scientific foundation and Christian view of humanity, which of course it's not teaching either of those. It's teaching an anti-scientific, an anti-Christian, and anti-Catholic view of sexuality, and of course it is not value-based, as I mentioned before, because it is secular-based rather than Catholic value-based. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention and talk about this. Anyways, that is it for today, and I will see you all next time.